Imagine buying a gift with all your heart, only to have the people you care about laugh at it in front of everyone. That's exactly what happened to my boyfriend, Tyler, on his birthday. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Emily, and I've never felt so powerless and furious at the same time. Tyler, my boyfriend of 3 years, had spent weeks making a handmade gift for my younger cousin, Liam, and when he finally gave it to him during his birthday party, the reaction was heartbreaking. Tyler's hands trembled as he handed over the gift, a small box wrapped in colorful paper. Liam tore it open with excitement, but as soon as he saw what was inside, he paused. Then, his parents, Brian and Vanessa, started laughing. The sound was loud, cruel, and filled with mockery. Tyler's eyes widened, and his smile faltered. I could feel the room spinning around me. How could they laugh at something Tyler had poured his heart into? I wanted to speak, to tell them to stop, but my voice caught in my throat. Tyler tried to laugh along, trying to hide his embarrassment, but the tremor in his hands gave him away. His face turned red, not just from embarrassment, but from the hurt that cut deeper than any words could. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, the silent question, why would they do this to me? I grabbed his hand under the table, squeezing it tightly. It's okay, I whispered, though I felt anything but okay. Every laugh felt like a punch to the stomach. I looked around and saw my family's shocked faces, some pretending not to notice, others too polite to intervene. Nobody said a word. Tyler's creativity, his effort, his love, it meant nothing to them in that moment. The party carried on, but Tyler and I stayed quiet. He couldn't eat, couldn't smile, couldn't pretend everything was normal. I felt rage bubbling inside me, not at Tyler, but at the people who had humiliated him in front of everyone. The laughter, the sneers, the whispered comments, they didn't just hurt Tyler, they hurt me too. That night, after the party, Tyler locked himself in the car. He sat silently, staring out the window, trying not to cry. I sat beside him, holding his hand, offering what little comfort I could. I whispered that their laughter said more about them than about him. I told him that his gift, his heart, and his effort were beautiful, even if nobody else saw it. I realized in that moment how cruel people can be when they feel threatened by honesty and love. Tyler's gift wasn't ugly. It wasn't wrong. It was pure, heartfelt, and full of care. And the way they mocked him revealed the kind of people they truly were. Their laughter was empty, mean-spirited, and shallow. Tyler's tears, his pain, became a mirror that reflected their ugliness, not his. I promised myself then that I would not let their cruelty define Tyler or his worth. I would stand by him, protect him, and show him that real value comes from heart and sincerity, not the approval of those who are too small to see it. That night, I vowed that their mockery would never win, and Tyler's heart, kindness, and talent would speak louder than their laughter ever could. Tyler had spent weeks creating a painting for Liam, putting every bit of his heart into it. It wasn't just a gift, it was a piece of him, something personal and meaningful. He had chosen colors carefully, worked late nights perfecting the details, and even included a little hidden message that only Liam would understand. He had hoped it would make Liam happy, maybe even proud, and he had been excited to see the smile on his face. When Tyler handed the painting to Liam, I thought the moment would be filled with joy. But instead, Brian and Vanessa's reaction shocked me. They laughed loudly, mocking the painting as ugly and childish. Their voices were sharp, full of ridicule, and the way they leaned in to make fun of it made it clear they wanted everyone to see. I felt my stomach drop. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. These were the people I trusted, my own family, and they were hurting someone I loved deeply. Tyler tried to hide his reaction. He smiled weakly, hoping it would soften their words or make the situation less humiliating. But it was clear in his eyes that he was crushed. His hands shook slightly as he held the painting, and I could see the hurt spreading across his face. The laughter didn't just sting, it cut into him, and there was nothing I could do at that moment to stop it. I looked around and noticed other family members shifting uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, or pretending nothing was happening. No one stepped in to defend Tyler or to stop Brian and Vanessa. Their cruelty was met with silence, and that made it even worse. Tyler's gift, which was filled with love and effort, was being dismissed as worthless in front of everyone. I reached for his hand under the table, wanting to give him some comfort. I whispered that it wasn't his fault, that their opinions didn't define the value of what he had created. But I could feel his disappointment. He had hoped to be appreciated, even a little, and instead, he had been humiliated. I could sense a mix of embarrassment and sadness in him that I had never seen before. It wasn't just the laughter that hurt, it was the betrayal. I realized that the people who were supposed to care, to protect, and to guide were the ones tearing him down. Tyler's heart had been open, and it had been met with cruelty. I felt my anger building, not at Tyler, but at Brian and Vanessa. Their behavior was unforgivable. Even as Tyler forced a smile, I could see the quiet dignity in him. He didn't lash out or cry in front of everyone, but inside, he was hurting deeply. I knew that moment would stay with him, that it would sting for a long time. But I also knew that it revealed the truth about Brian and Vanessa. Their laughter wasn't just mocking the painting, it exposed their lack of empathy, their meanness, and their willingness to put someone else down for their own amusement. I promised myself then that I wouldn't let this betrayal define Tyler. He had created something beautiful, and their opinions couldn't take that away. Their cruelty was their own reflection, and Tyler's talent and heart would shine far beyond their mockery. That painting, though insulted, would become a symbol of his resilience and of the injustice we had witnessed.
After the party, Tyler didn't want to go back inside. He went straight to his car and closed the door quietly. I followed him, my heart heavy, and saw him sitting there, his head in his hands. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks, and I could feel the weight of everything he had gone through. I had never seen him like this before, so hurt, yet somehow still holding himself together with dignity. I sat beside him and gently held his hand. I didn't say anything at first. Sometimes words can't fix a pain that deep. I could feel his trembling fingers, and I realized how deeply the laughter and mockery had cut him. He had given so much, worked so hard, and yet the people he wanted to impress had crushed him in front of everyone. Finally, I whispered to him that their behavior said more about them than about him. They had revealed their true selves, their meanness, their arrogance, and their inability to appreciate real effort. Tyler looked at me, his eyes filled with pain but also a hint of understanding. I knew he was processing not just the embarrassment, but the betrayal. We stayed there for a while, sitting in silence. I could feel the anger building inside me, and I knew it matched his hurt. It wasn't just about the painting, it was about the fact that someone we trusted had openly humiliated a kind and genuine person. That realization hit me harder than I expected. I spoke again, more firmly this time. I told Tyler that he didn't deserve any of it, and that their laughter didn't define his worth. I reminded him that his effort, his talent, and his heart were what mattered, and no one could take that away from him. He listened quietly, nodding, though I could see the sadness hadn't left his eyes. As we sat together, I began thinking about what could be done. I couldn't let this slide. Their cruelty had consequences, and I wanted to make sure Tyler's pain wasn't wasted. I wanted them to understand, in some way, that what they did was wrong, and that their mockery couldn't break his spirit. Tyler finally leaned back in the seat, exhausted, but I could see determination forming in his expression. He had taken the first step, letting himself feel the hurt instead of pretending everything was fine. That vulnerability made him stronger. I realized then that this moment, as painful as it was, could be the beginning of something bigger. I promised myself quietly that I would stand by him and help him rise above their cruelty. Their laughter had marked a turning point, not an ending. Tyler's dignity, his talent, and his heart were far more powerful than the shallow ridicule of Brian and Vanessa. That night in the car, I made a decision: we would not be broken, and we would make them see the truth without lowering ourselves to their level. After that night, I couldn't shake the image of Tyler crying silently in the car. Every time I thought about Brian and Vanessa laughing at him, something inside me tightened. I knew their behavior wasn't just a moment of rudeness, it was part of who they were. So I made up my mind to pay attention to everything about them, not with anger, but with clear eyes. I started noticing the way they talked to people, how they acted superior, how they showed off things they didn't even own, and how they twisted stories to make themselves look better. Their arrogance was always there, I had just ignored it before. I began collecting small details, things most people would overlook. Their constant bragging, the way they treated people they thought were beneath them, the lies they told to make themselves sound successful. I saw the pattern clearly now. They loved being admired, and they loved attention. That was their weakness. If the world stopped seeing them the way they wanted, they would fall apart. I shared everything with Tyler. We didn't talk about revenge in a dramatic way. It wasn't about hurting them physically or shouting at them. We wanted something quiet but strong. Something that didn't drag us down to their level. Something that let the truth speak for itself. Tyler listened carefully, his eyes focused, not angry but thoughtful. Even though he was still hurt, I could see him slowly gaining strength. We talked for hours about how to move forward. Tyler didn't want to become bitter or hateful, and neither did I. We wanted to show people who Brian and Vanessa really were without being cruel. The idea wasn't to embarrass them just for satisfaction. It was to make sure they didn't get to hurt anyone else the way they hurt him. We both knew they wouldn't stop unless someone exposed their behavior. I told Tyler that he didn't need to prove anything to them. What he needed was to prove something to himself, to stand tall, to rise, to let his talent speak louder than their mockery. And I promised him, with complete certainty, they'll regret laughing at you when they see what you're capable of. For the first time since the party, I saw a real spark in his eyes. He believed me, and he believed in himself, even if just a little bit. That was enough. I wanted him to understand that he didn't need their approval. He only needed the chance to show what he could do when he wasn't held back by their cruelty. Over the next days, we made quiet plans. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Just steps that would slowly reveal the truth. I kept noting down their behavior, and Tyler kept working on himself, focusing on his art again, putting his emotions into something real. I could see him healing slowly, replacing pain with determination. It wasn't revenge fueled by anger, it was a controlled, calculated decision to stop being silent. They had shown their true colors in front of everyone, and now it was time for the world to see them clearly too. Over the next few weeks, Tyler and I worked quietly but steadily. I helped him set up social media accounts for his artwork, choosing simple places where real people could see real talent. At first, Tyler was unsure. He didn't think anyone would care about his paintings. But I reminded him that people couldn't appreciate what they had never seen. So we started posting one piece at a time, clear photos, short captions, and honest stories behind each artwork. Slowly, something beautiful began to happen. People started liking his posts, leaving comments, asking questions, and even sharing his work. Tyler's confidence grew a little each day. He wasn't chasing fame, he was simply sharing something he loved. And for the first time, strangers appreciated him more than the people who had mocked him. Watching his growth made me even more certain that Brian and Vanessa were wrong about him from the beginning. While Tyler was building something meaningful, I noticed Brian and Vanessa behaving exactly the same as always. They kept showing off every little thing they owned, or claimed to own. They bragged about new cars, fancy home upgrades, expensive trips, and business deals that never sounded real. They tried so hard to impress people, but everything about them felt hollow. The more I paid attention, the more obvious it became that their so-called wealth was just a mask. They borrowed things, exaggerated everything, and pretended to be more successful than they actually were. They lived for attention, and they loved the feeling of being admired. It was clear that they believed their image would protect them from any kind of embarrassment. They acted like they were untouchable. But the truth had a way of showing itself. Tyler's art was slowly reaching more people, and with every new follower, with every kind message, I could feel our position getting stronger. Tyler wasn't just healing, he was rising. And the higher he rose, the more fragile Brian and Vanessa's fake reputation began to look. I didn't need to do anything dramatic. All I had to do was watch them reveal themselves. They were so desperate to appear wealthy that they didn't notice how transparent they were becoming. People around them started whispering, questioning why every story they told sounded too perfect. Their bragging turned into something people rolled their eyes at instead of admired. During this time, Tyler kept working. His art became a place where he put all his emotions, his pain, his hope, his growth. And people loved it. His page slowly filled with support and encouragement, something he had never received from the people who should have cared about him. Seeing that validation made him stronger. Brian and Vanessa, meanwhile, had no idea their facade was weakening. They continued showing off, believing that attention was the same as respect. They didn't realize that respect can't be bought or faked, it has to be earned. As Tyler grew, I knew the balance was shifting. We were no longer the quiet, hurt couple sitting in the car after a humiliating night. We were becoming something stronger, something clearer. And without even knowing it, Brian and Vanessa were giving us all the leverage we needed to show the world exactly who they were. I had been planning carefully for weeks, and finally, the right opportunity came. There was a charity event at a local gallery that Brian and Vanessa were known to attend every year. I reached out to the organizers and managed to get Tyler's best painting displayed there. It was subtle, no announcements, no grand gestures, but I knew the right people would see it. Tyler had no idea how perfectly timed it was. On the night of the event, we arrived early. The gallery was crowded with people, and Tyler looked nervous, quietly adjusting his display. I reassured him, telling him to focus on the art, not the audience. Most of the guests were strangers, yet I could sense excitement building. People were stopping, looking closely at his painting, pointing out details, and whispering to each other about how impressive it was. Tyler's face began to light up with the first real recognition he had received in so long. Then Brian and Vanessa arrived, dressed in their usual showy attire, confident as ever. They were laughing, chatting, and showing off to anyone who would listen about their latest successes. I could see their eyes scanning the gallery, and when they reached Tyler's piece, I noticed their reaction slowly change. At first, there was confusion, they didn't know how to respond. Then I saw their smug smiles falter, replaced by something closer to shock. People were admiring Tyler's work openly, praising the technique, the detail, and the emotion in the painting. Guests who had never met him before were asking questions, taking photos, and congratulating him. Tyler stood there quietly, accepting the compliments, his hand slightly shaking but his posture proud. Every word of admiration was like a small victory, and I could feel the tension in the room. Brian and Vanessa tried to recover their composure. They leaned in, whispering to each other, attempting to downplay the attention Tyler was getting. But it was too late. The guests weren't impressed with their wealth or status, they were drawn to the authenticity and talent in front of them. Every laugh they had shared at the birthday party seemed foolish now. Tyler's painting wasn't just being noticed, it was celebrated, and the contrast to their earlier cruelty was undeniable. I watched carefully as the realization hit them. The mockery they thought was harmless had turned into a moment of exposure. They couldn't control the room, couldn't redirect attention, and couldn't hide the truth about themselves. Tyler's talent, honesty, and heart had outshone their arrogance. Tyler looked at me with a small smile, his eyes reflecting relief and quiet triumph. I knew he finally understood that their opinions didn't matter. The world was seeing him for who he really was, and for the first time, the people who had humiliated him were powerless. By the end of the evening, Tyler's painting had won first prize, and he was being celebrated by everyone around. Brian and Vanessa left early, their confidence shattered and their laughter from the past seeming almost cruel in retrospect. That night, I realized how powerful truth could be. Tyler's heart had been genuine, and his talent had spoken louder than any of their mockery ever could. The exposure was complete, and justice, quiet yet undeniable, had been served. The next family gathering was the perfect moment. I had decided it was time to confront Brian and Vanessa, but I wanted to do it calmly, without anger or shouting. The goal wasn't to humiliate them in the same cruel way they had treated Tyler, but to show the truth clearly in front of everyone. Tyler and I arrived together, prepared for what needed to be said. As the extended family gathered, I spoke up. I reminded them of the birthday party, how they had laughed at Tyler's handmade gift, called it ugly and childish, and crushed his spirit in front of everyone. I described it simply, clearly, without exaggeration. I spoke of the hurt in Tyler's eyes, the silent tears, and the dignity he had tried to maintain despite their cruelty. Every word was calm but firm. Tyler stood beside me, his posture straight, his head held high. He didn't need to say much, his confidence and calm presence said everything. The room felt tense. Family members who had been silent before looked at Brian and Vanessa with new eyes. They could see what I was saying wasn't an exaggeration. Brian and Vanessa's faces changed. Their smiles faded, and their usual arrogance disappeared. They turned red with embarrassment, unable to deny what had happened. I could see them searching for words, but nothing came. For once, they had no control over the narrative. Every cruel comment, every laugh at Tyler's expense, was now visible to everyone around them. I continued, explaining how Tyler had taken their cruelty in stride, how he had turned his pain into something meaningful through his art, and how the world had begun to recognize his talent and heart. I spoke about the charity gallery, the admiration he had received, and how people valued him for who he really was. Their mockery, I said, had only highlighted their own meanness. Throughout this, Tyler remained composed. He didn't gloat or show anger. His calmness made the contrast even sharper. I watched as our family members nodded, some whispering quietly, acknowledging the injustice Tyler had faced. The room had shifted from one of discomfort to one of quiet understanding. Brian and Vanessa tried to defend themselves, offering excuses or shifting blame, but no one listened. The truth was clear, and their embarrassment was evident. Their behavior had been exposed not through shouting or revenge, but through the undeniable strength and integrity of Tyler. By the end of the confrontation, the air felt different. Tyler had reclaimed his dignity, and their attempts to belittle him had backfired completely. I could feel a sense of quiet satisfaction, not from revenge, but from justice served through truth. The confrontation had been calm, controlled, and powerful. Tyler's courage, combined with the evidence of their cruelty, had spoken louder than any harsh words ever could. For the first time, Brian and Vanessa experienced the weight of their actions in a way they couldn't ignore or hide. After the confrontation, Tyler's life started to change in ways I had only hoped for. People who had seen his work online or at the gallery began reaching out, asking if he could create custom paintings for them. At first, Tyler was nervous, unsure if he was ready for this kind of attention. But as more messages came in, he realized that people genuinely appreciated his talent. Each new commission was a small victory, proof that his efforts and heart were valued. Tyler worked tirelessly, pouring everything he had into his art. He experimented with new styles, added personal touches, and always made sure that every piece carried sincerity and emotion. People noticed. Comments on his posts grew more thoughtful, praising not only the beauty of his paintings but the honesty behind them. Strangers began sharing his work, telling friends about how talented he was, and soon, his reach extended far beyond our city. Meanwhile, Brian and Vanessa's carefully maintained image began to crack. Friends and neighbors who had once admired them quietly started talking about what had happened at the birthday party. Stories spread of how they had mocked Tyler's handmade gift and humiliated him in front of everyone. People who had believed in their kind and generous reputation began to see the truth. Their laughter at Tyler's effort and the way they treated him didn't match the image they had worked so hard to build. It was interesting to watch the contrast. Tyler's rise was natural and genuine, while Brian and Vanessa's reputation relied entirely on appearances. As his recognition grew, their credibility began to fade. People who had once been impressed by their wealth or social standing now questioned their character. The mockery they had thought was harmless now looked petty and cruel. Tyler didn't let it bother him personally. He stayed focused on his art and the people who truly valued it. Every positive message, every commission, and every expression of support reminded him that he didn't need their approval. The admiration he received was real, earned through talent and sincerity, not by pretending to be someone he wasn't. I watched him grow with pride. The shy, hurt boy from the birthday party had become confident, recognized, and respected. People loved his work, but more importantly, they respected him for his honesty and dedication. He had turned pain into creativity, hurt into achievement, and humiliation into motivation. Brian and Vanessa, on the other hand, were left to face the consequences of their actions. Their arrogance and cruelty were now visible to the people who mattered. While Tyler gained genuine praise and opportunities, they lost credibility and respect. Their facade of perfection had crumbled, revealing the shallow and unkind people behind it. Tyler's triumph was more than recognition, it was proof that talent, heart, and perseverance always win over mockery and arrogance. Every commission, every compliment, and every small victory reminded him, and reminded us, that the people who try to put others down often end up exposing their own flaws, while true value shines through, unstoppable and undeniable. Tyler's journey had finally reached a point I had hoped for, but the difference now was deeper than just recognition. It wasn't about people liking his art, it was about him believing in himself again. After everything that had happened, after the mocking and humiliation, his confidence had been shaken. But now, watching him work on a new painting, completely absorbed and happy, I could see that spark return. His smile was genuine, effortless, the kind that comes from knowing your worth and finally feeling seen. I realized that the true victory wasn't in making Brian and Vanessa feel embarrassed or exposing their cruelty. The real triumph was in Tyler reclaiming his own confidence. He didn't need anyone else to validate him, he had done that for himself through his dedication, talent, and persistence. Every compliment, every commission, every supportive message reinforced what I had always known, that his heart and effort mattered more than anyone's shallow judgment. Seeing him so happy and self-assured made me reflect on what revenge really meant. It wasn't about being cruel or retaliating, it was about justice and truth. Tyler had been treated unfairly, mocked for showing kindness and creativity. But in the end, he had shown the world, and himself, that arrogance and mockery could never diminish genuine talent and a good heart. That lesson was far more powerful than any act of revenge could ever be. Tyler started sharing more of his process online, showing how much thought and care went into each piece. People were inspired not just by the art, but by the story behind it. They appreciated the emotion, the effort, and the honesty. For Tyler, this wasn't just about success, it was about being recognized for who he truly was. Every kind comment, every shared post, and every new opportunity reminded him that his worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval or criticism. I watched him interact with new clients, answering questions confidently, explaining his work, and sometimes laughing at how far he had come. He had regained the pride and joy he had lost during that cruel party. The shy, hurt expression he had worn for weeks was gone, replaced with a calm, assured presence that drew people toward him. What struck me most was how peaceful he seemed. There was no lingering anger, no desire to see Brian and Vanessa humiliated further. The satisfaction came from knowing he had risen above their cruelty, that his talent and kindness had won in a way they never could. In that moment, I understood that the entire journey, the pain, the struggle, the careful planning, had led to something far greater than simple revenge. It was about proving a simple truth: heart, effort, and talent always shine brighter than arrogance, mockery, and cruelty. Tyler's genuine smile, the pride in his eyes, and the recognition he finally earned were proof that justice doesn't need to be loud, it simply needs to be real. Watching him, I felt a deep sense of closure. The hurt had been transformed into strength, the humiliation into motivation, and the mockery into a lesson that would guide him for the rest of his life. Tyler had not just survived their cruelty, he had flourished because of it. Our story ends with a lesson that is simple but powerful: no one else gets to decide your value. Tyler's tears during that cruel birthday party were painful to see, but they revealed more than just his hurt, they exposed the true nature of the people who laughed at him. Their mockery, their arrogance, and their lack of empathy became clear for everyone to see, while Tyler's sincerity, effort, and talent shone even brighter in contrast. Over time, I watched Tyler grow in ways that went far beyond recognition for his art. He became more confident, more self-assured, and more comfortable in his own skin. He learned that the opinions of those who try to put others down are not worth carrying. Instead of letting their ridicule define him, he used it as motivation to prove to himself, and quietly to the world, what he was capable of. Tyler's growth wasn't just about skill or fame. It was about character. He remained kind, humble, and hardworking, even when others had tried to make him feel small. He didn't stoop to their level, didn't try to humiliate them in return, and didn't let bitterness control him. That restraint and dignity made his success even stronger because it came from heart, not vengeance. Watching him interact with people now, I saw how much respect he earned naturally. His art drew attention, but it was his honesty and dedication that truly inspired others. People wanted to support him, not because of his story, but because of the integrity he showed every day. He became a reminder that talent and sincerity always stand out, even in the face of cruelty. Meanwhile, Brian and Vanessa faded into the background. Their reputation had been built on appearances, not substance, and when the truth came to light, people saw through their facade. Their laughter and mockery no longer mattered. Tyler had risen above it, unstoppable in his confidence and direction. I realized that the tears Tyler shed were not a sign of weakness, they were a part of his journey toward strength. They marked the moment he faced cruelty, felt pain, and chose to grow rather than be defeated. Every step he took after that moment was a step toward freedom from their judgment, a step toward becoming the person he was always meant to be. The moral is clear: let your actions, your heart, and your talent define you, not the insults or ridicule of others. True worth comes from within, and those who try to diminish you only reveal their own flaws. Tyler's journey shows that even the deepest hurt can become a source of strength when met with courage and determination. In the end, Tyler didn't just gain recognition or success. He gained respect, confidence, and the knowledge that no mockery could ever stop him. He had risen stronger, more resilient, and unstoppable. His story is proof that facing cruelty with grace and using it to fuel your growth is the most powerful kind of victory anyone can achieve.